Buddha. Good morning, everyone. On this beautifully cold morning. I was complaining about it earlier, but now I'm like, you know what? It's at the perfect temperature where it's okay with me. Okay. Good morning again. So today, I am going to go over very quickly, very briefly, hopefully, the 5 hindrances. So last year, if you were with our class, we spent a few months on the 5 hindrances alone. So I'm going to try to condense all that information into one class. I can't make any guarantees, but I'm hoping that I'll get through them all. Hopefully, just to give you an idea, since the main topic of this semester is developing and strengthening that concentration. And in order to do that, we need to work with the 5 hindrances, or know how to work with the 5 hindrances, since the hindrances are the obstacles that arise during our meditation practice. And so if we don't know how to work with them, how to react with them, how to counter-react to them, then we won't be able to really strengthen that concentration at all. For the most part, for advanced levels of meditation, you have to have the hindrances completely eradicated, which means that they do not occur at all. However, just even to be able to successfully meditate or have successful sessions, or even advance to a certain point, we can at least lessen the strength of these hindrances as they occur. So you don't have to be completely eradicated from our mind, but enough where they don't hinder us during the practice. So the 5 hindrances are desire, ill will or aversion, sloth and torpor or laziness, restlessness and worry and doubt. So I'm going to very briefly, I laugh because you know me, I can talk forever, and so I'm going to try to maintain my focus today. So desire for the 5 hindrances, in the context of the 5 hindrances, is a little bit different, slightly different than what we would typically work with desire in a different context. For instance, like when we work with the four noble truths, right? The second noble truth is the cause of our suffering, which in that case is desire, but that's a different type of desire for the most part, a little bit different. But in the 5 hindrances, desire here really just means the attachment that we have to certain things, the attachment that we have to certain thoughts, the attachment that we have to only wanting pleasurable feelings and averting unpleasurable feelings, right? It's the clinging to and looking for and going after things that are pleasurable only, right? And then we ignore the things that are unpleasurable. So when we work with desire here, we are, as it arises, we are watching that desire. What is a desire for? Where is it coming from? What is the root cause of this desire? Why am I having it, right? And in order to work with that, all these have antidotes for the most part. But when we are working with desire here, we are trying to alleviate or get rid of the desire here is trying to change things that already are, right? To change something that's unpleasurable to pleasurable, changing reality basically. We're trying to change something that already is. So as we're sitting in meditation, for instance, you know, typically pain arises sometimes, right? And so we have a desire to not have pain, right, as an example. Or as things come up, right, thoughts and distractions, sometimes the thought and distraction is food, And so we start thinking about food. What are we going to eat? What do we want? Where do I want to go after this class? Do I want to pick something up? Do I want to go home and cook something? Am I just going to stop by McDonald's because I'm lazy and it's a Saturday? So there's different types of desire. And what hinders our meditation at that point is because we have this desire thought, and then we run with it, typically, for the most part. We don't catch ourselves drifting off into a land of imaginary lands, right? We are overthinking things. We are entertaining these thoughts that don't lead us anywhere. They aren't doing anything good for us, right? So as we sit, for instance, and we are on our object of meditation, and I think I mentioned this in our last class, the main object of our meditation for this semester is going to be strictly on the practice of mindfulness of our breath. So your object of meditation for every single class is going to be the breath. As you're breathing, right, you have different methods. Most typically, you're just counting in, out, 1, in, out, 2, in, out, 3, up until 10. And you reverse, and you go back to 1, or reverse from 10 to 1, whatever you need to do. So anyway, as you meditate on your meditation object and thought food arises, right, I always try to mention to catch those distractions by labeling them, right? So if you're sitting and you're feeling pain, you make the notation of pain. If you're sitting and you're feeling or thinking of food, you just make the label of food, right? You're not interacting with a thought. You're not entertaining it. You're simply just labeling what it is as it is and moving on, going back to your meditation object. So for any other desirous feeling that we have, to counter it, we meditate on impermanence, right? Because all our pleasures and desires of life, truly at the end of its cycle, is impermanent, right? The desire to be free from pain as you're sitting is impermanent, because as soon as you adjust yourself, or as soon as you get up or leave, that pain goes away, usually, right? So even the pain that you're feeling is impermanent. Feeling of the desire for, I always say this, the new house or the fancy car, right? Eventually that fancy car will run its mileage and shut down and stop working, right? Or the house starts to crumble or burn down, right? Even people that we love and the relationships we have, the jobs that we have, at one point or another, they will all end in some shape or form, right? So the understanding that things are impermanent helps us release the desire that we have for things, or at least the attachment that we have to it, right? Because the main point here is the attachment to these desires. It's not bad to have the desires to begin with, because it's okay to have a desire. We have to have a desire to succeed in life, right? We have to have a desire to want to meditate so that we can better ourselves, cleanse our minds and the defilements. We have to have a desire to succeed in our career, to have a successful family, right? To have a healthy life. Desire in itself is not bad. What's bad is the attachment that we have to some of these desires, right? So if you have desire to succeed in work, sometimes if you're not thinking mindfully, you will do potentially unethical things or immoral things to get the job you want, right? We start throwing people under the bus, or maybe we start lying or cheating. We do things that are unwholesome, right? And so if we meditate on impermanence when it comes to those desires, then it's easier to accept things as it is, right? You don't get your way, you accept it, right? Things happen. You don't get what you want. The food isn't as flavorful as you wanted, right? Or your vacation wasn't as satisfying as you thought it was. It doesn't matter. Those feelings and those desires, those wants and needs will eventually halt and fade away. So, and then the next hindrance is ill will or aversion, right? And aversion, especially in meditation, comes in different aspects, right? It comes up as anger or hatred, fear, irritation, annoyance, right? So these are the feelings that we get that kind of stem from desire, right? So maybe a desire for to be somewhere else, maybe, right, arises. And then you start thinking of, oh, maybe I want to be at this place, or I want to go to this restaurant, or whatever it is. But then at the same time, you recall maybe that the service was bad, or someone that works there you don't like is there, right? And so you're averse to wanting to go there. I'm just using a dumb example. But in meditation, when aversion arises, again, it's the opposite of desire, right? For desire, we want pleasurable feelings. In aversion, we are pushing away the unpleasurable, undesirous feelings, right? So pain, for instance, we're averse as soon as we feel pain. We're averse that the pain is even there to begin with, right? We start questioning ourselves. Why am I feeling pain? Am I sitting incorrectly? Is my posture wrong? Is my meditation wrong? Right? You start questioning, you start doubting yourself, doubting your practice. And so we're averse to our sitting session. And a lot of times I hear a lot of people say when they sit that they're so uncomfortable that it literally discourages them from continuing their meditation practice, right? Instead of correcting their sit, instead of correcting their posture, or correcting the meditation method that they're using, right, to better themselves, better the practice, they just give up altogether, right? Because they have that simple, averse thought to, I'm doing something wrong, or that my meditation is wrong, right? Sorry. So instead of being averse to things, and in all the hindrances, we don't want to push them away, right? We don't want to deny that they're there, right? Because a lot of times when we're sitting, because you know me, when people ask me what do I do with pain, I'm like, well, first step is to slightly adjust yourself, but eventually you want to kind of suck it up, because you have to get your body used to the sitting, right? But eventually, so as you're sitting, instead of trying to push away these feelings and any of the hindrances, you fully experience them, right? You have to fully be with it to accept it. Because if you just push it away, if you just hang on to it, you hold on to whatever is happening, and you try to suppress it, then it's still gonna come up, right? It's still considered a hindrance because you're not working with it. Right? For any of the hindrances, you have to work with it to feel where it's coming from, why it's there, why it's arising, what's happening in our mind, right? You have to work with the feelings in order to get to know their source and their roots in order to actually overcome them. If you're just suppressing them, then you're really just skipping, right? Because if you skip, you still have to go back and do it again, right? Think of a test. If you're going down the test and you skip one, right, it's blank. After you finish everything else, you still have to go back to it, right? So the same thing with the hindrances. Instead of suppressing, instead of skipping it, instead of trying to avoid it, work with it. Try to overcome it, and then move on, right? So I'm gonna stop. Ill will is probably, I think, of all the classes I spent, the longest on ill will and aversion, because in meditation we have a lot of aversion, especially when we're sitting for quite some time. I think that was one of the biggest obstacles when we had a retreat last year, was from people commenting on sitting all day, right? Our retreat's from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And at least 80% of that time we were sitting. And so people are just not used to sitting for that long. So that was the biggest complaint or challenge for people. Because with that discomfort that you get from sitting, you are feeding more averse thoughts to arise, right? Now if you're feeling, oh, my knee hurts, right? If you don't work with it, it's going to continue to grow. That pain's going to continue to grow. And it may seep up to, now your whole leg is hurting, right? And now your whole back is hurting, right? And now you're getting a headache because your entire body is just completely uncomfortable. And from there you start questioning, why am I even doing this in the first place? Am I even benefiting from this, right? All this extra negative thinking is arising because you didn't do something about it when it first arose, right? If you took care of the feeling of, if you took care of the painful feeling in your knee when it first happened, then all the subsequent things that happened after that wouldn't have happened in the first place, right? So when things arise, we need to address it as soon as we can, right? Same thing when thoughts arise. I always say, try to watch your thinking, right? Meditation isn't just to sit and to clear your mind. What's the point of that? You're wasting your time, right? There's a point to meditation. And the point of meditation is to not just develop that concentration, but to get to know your mind, get to know how your mind is working, right? Because everything in life stems from our mind. Our thoughts, our ideas, our perceptions, our opinions, our biases, our discriminations, everything arises from our mind, right? Nothing external typically hurts us as much as our own mind does, right? External circumstances has ways to manipulate and change and help overcome or see things correctly, perceptively, but ultimately everything is mind-centered, right? So same thing when, so if we're meditating and a thought arises, a distraction, pain arises, we're going to continue with the pain example. Pain arises, if you don't label it as soon as possible and do something about it, again, it's going to continue and create more areas of pain in the body until it gets to a point where you may give up, right? It discourages you completely. Or the same thing if you're thinking badly about someone, right? Again, the road rage example. If someone cuts you off, if you don't control yourself at that very moment, then you're going to start thinking negative things about them, right? You're going to start cussing back, you're cursing back, you're flipping them off, you're trying to speed in front of them and cut them off too, right? You're causing more damage that way because you didn't just accept that something happened and move on with it, right? It already happened, someone cut you off, there's no going back in time. But because we have such an egotistical mind where it's like, how dare you cut me off? Who do you think you are? Right? So we start to speed up and cut them off. But if we do that, what happens there? Right? There's a potential for an accident. There's a potential for damage to your car, to their car, maybe loss of life even, right? So is that even worth it at the end, right? Is all the hassle of destroying cars, destroying lives, destroying finances, was it all worth it just to get revenge? Probably not, right? But if we're able to see that negative thought arise when it arose in the first place and catch it at that moment before it carries on to states of revenge and ways to revenge back, then we can avoid any unwholesome actions happening. Okay, that's enough with ill will. The third hindrance is sloth and torpor, or just laziness. This is essentially an imbalance of energy, basically. So here is when we have too little energy. And it's probably the most common obstacle for many people, especially if you're trying to, and I always say don't try to meditate for long periods of time, because if you're not practiced enough, then it's going to be very difficult to even sit for 15, 20, 30 minutes, right? Because eventually, if you don't know what you're doing, on one hand, right? Or if you don't know how to do something correctly, or if you don't know really what to do in the session, then you're going to get pretty bored very quickly and lose interest and lose the energy you need to maintain a meditation session practice. So we need to find that balance between enough energy and stability in the practice, right? The calmness and the tranquility we need to have a successful balanced session. So as we meditate, if, and some of the ways to overcome that lightheadedness, the heaviness of minds, right? If we're trying to fall asleep, there's some practices that we can do to overcome that. Because there's really not, mentally, there's not much we can do when it comes to laziness in our meditation, right? Because it's just a lack of energy, lack of motivation, lack of inspiration, maybe even. And so what is helpful for a lot of people when they first start to practice meditation is to make a proclamation of why you're meditating, right? Because if you just sit to meditate just for the sake of meditating, then what are you trying to get from it, right? What's the benefit you're trying to achieve? And I think I've said this in our first class when we first came back from break, this is an intro to Buddhist meditation. So I'm teaching you the Buddhist way to meditate and the Buddhist reasonings and goals to meditate, right? And I mentioned that if you're here to meditate in order to try to overcome your anxiety or stress or depression or whatever it is, you're in the wrong place. That's not my goal to teach, right? Those are mundane goals. These are also byproducts of meditation anyway, right? These are fruits that you will already receive from meditating correctly anyway, right? You will naturally, your anxiety, your stress, your monkey minds, right? The thoughtful mind, all these will decrease naturally through meditative practice, right? So that's not really our goal. Our goal here is to develop that concentration, because from concentration we develop wisdom, and from wisdom, that's the mindset that we need in order to become enlightened, right? So if you want to have any aha moments, any enlightened moments, you have to have that wisdom, right? And that wisdom only comes from being able to master our concentration. To master our concentration, we need to overcome some obstacles, and the 5 hindrances is one of those obstacles. So if you're meditating at home, for instance, and you're feeling sluggish, right, or lazy in your practice, you can, what we typically do, especially in temples when we do formal meditation sessions, is we alternate between sitting and walking meditation. Especially in the morning when we do, after our morning prayers, we sit for 90 minutes and we walk for 15, 20 minutes and we sit down another 30 minutes, right? There's that break of walking meditation, right? To kind of get you up and moving, get your blood flowing, get your body moving, right? To help kind of wake you up. And that's what you can do as well, right? And depending also on how you're sitting. If you're closing your eyes completely, right? Sometimes that causes the sluggishness, the sleepiness, right? And your mind might think you're in a position to sleep, right? So if you keep your eyes semi-open, right? That way there's a little bit light of coming in, but eyes are not wide open enough to see your surroundings, right? Because you don't want to see your surroundings too much, so that you don't get distracted from things happening outside of just a few feet in front of you. So if you're feeling sleepiness, right, when you're meditating, feel free to stand up, right? Just standing up. You don't have to do walking, but just stand up, right? Get some blood flowing, right? Get that sleepiness off your mind, right? And if it's not sleepiness, right, you're just kind of feeling sluggish, then there's an aspect of boredom there, right? And that boredom comes from lack of motivation, lack of energy, lack of strong enough concentration in the session. So you really, again, it's a good idea to make a proclamation before you sit as to why you're meditating. Why are you sitting? What is your goal when you sit, right? And again, this doesn't go back to desire, because this is a good desire. Right? This is the desire to do something, to accomplish something. So just making that statement of why do you want to sit will help settle your mind enough to be able to give away, right? Give a path as to why you're meditating. The fourth hindrance is restlessness. So restlessness is pretty much the opposite of sloth, right? Restlessness is too much energy, right? Sometimes we get a little too hyped up in our days, right? Too much caffeine or whatever it may be, right? So too much energy causes our mind causes that monkey mind, right? We've heard the monkey mind. Monkey mind is just our mind jumping from one thought to another, right? Constantly jumping, right? Our mind is not able to settle. It's not able to slow down because there's too much monkeys up in there, right? Looking for bananas. And the bananas is the distractions that we tend to hold on to and entertain. So if we have too much energy, which I think is probably the rarest hindrance of the five, because really, who has too much energy? I feel like we live in a society where there's no such thing as too much energy. We work too much, we do things too often that we're just constantly exhausted. Right? I rarely see people with too much energy, but I see exhaustion every day, right? And so it's not something that we typically have to worry about, but sometimes what can happen is, even if we don't really necessarily have a restless mind, right, we don't have too much energy, what can sometimes happen is if we are in a state of true samadhi, right? Samadhi is the one-pointedness concentration, right? It's the calm and stable mind where there's very little distraction, right? We're completely calm. Our breath is very subtle, it's very shallow, and we're really in a true state of meditation, right? What can happen sometimes is when we're in that situation or when we're in that mindset, the feeling of excitement can arise because we're like, holy crap, this is it. I'm in that true meditation spot, right? And that true meditation spot could be access concentration, or it can be the first level of the four jhanas, of advanced mental states of consciousness. And so when we're in that mindset and that excitement arises, then that's where too much energy can happen, right? Because we get excited that we're in a new place, we're in a new state of consciousness, and so we get excited about it. And what can happen there is, even though we get excited about it and we recognize that we're in a good place, the excitement itself can actually eradicate the state of mind that we're in, because there's too much energy. There's too much energy that we overpower the stable mindset, right? We're overworking it, right? We're basically burning it out, so it stops working, and so we lose our true state of true state of meditation. I won't go over that too much because again, it's rare, right? Does anyone here get too excited when they meditate? Besides Cynthia?
I know, like for me, I haven't been doing anything. Maybe going for like a walk or a jog or something really helps, like kind of settle me down instead of like wanting to fidget, move around, cut it short.
Yeah, and there's one way to work, if we are in a restless state, one way to work through that is to super fixate and focus on our breathing, right? And to calm our mind and calm our body through mindfulness of breathing, right? So going back to the breath, always go back to the breath. So whatever method of meditation you're using, if you're counting or if you're just using the sensations of the breathing as your object of meditation, then change the method, right? If you're not counting, then do counting, right? If you're counting, then do something else, right? Change the method that you're using in order to kind of distract your mind from one thing and change it to something else, right? It'll help settle it, right? Because you're in a way, you're distracting it, but in a good way, not a bad distraction, but you're taking it away from what it's being excited about to something else that's a little bit more rigorous, right? Or at least different. So it'll help settle that restlessness that we're having. And then the last hindrance is doubt. Doubt here is what happens when we feel like we're failing, or when we're not doing things correctly, or we feel like our meditation isn't going anywhere, right? It's the doubt in our practice, doubt in the teachings, doubt in the method, right? And this happens often to a lot of beginner meditators, because they're like, oh, my mind is too restless, it's just jumping everywhere, I'm uncomfortable often, I can't keep my concentration on the breath, or this and that, right? There's a lot of doubt and questioning with what you're doing, right? And again, that doubt, if it's too much, if you're not doing anything about it, then it becomes discouragement to the practice, right? And you start discouraging yourself from wanting to do it again, or to continue practicing, or to at least to correct what you're doing. Because you're thinking, I'm not doing this right, I'm not doing this right, right? And so if you're thinking constantly, I'm not doing this right, or I'm not benefiting from this, or whatever it may be, then you ultimately convince yourself to not meditate anymore, because it's not doing anything for you. And that's another thing too, is meditation is not a get happy pill, right? I always bring the example, you can't go to the gym once and call yourself a bodybuilder, right? Same thing, you can't go to meditation class once and call yourself a Zen master. Right? It takes practice, it takes effort. It's a very disciplined practice. And you don't have to meditate for hours a day, every day, right? Because it's truly, in meditation, it's about the quality and not the quantity. So if you're sitting for 5 minutes of meditation, and it's true quality meditation where you're truly focused and concentrated and fixating on your meditation object correctly, it's better than sitting for a whole hour completely distracted the whole time, right? Would you rather waste an hour of your life doing nothing, or 5 minutes doing something correctly, right? Probably the 5 minutes. But in order to truly benefit from the fruits of meditation, you have to constantly have those good 5 minutes every day, right? So create a disciplined practice, right? Even if it's just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it really doesn't matter. But having that scheduled sit every day, right? And letting your mind know, hey, it's time to sit this at 10 o'clock every day, every morning, then your mind gets used to okay, this is time for meditation. This is time to clear my mind. This is time to develop that concentration, right? Because we're here to reprogram our mind, basically, right? Because as we sit, we're literally telling our mind, hey, stop thinking too much, right? Is obsessed with time. It's obsessed with the past, and it's obsessed with the future, right? So when you sit and try to meditate in the here and now and in the present and being in the present, your mind's like, no, let's think about that one time where that one person pissed us off last week, right? Let's worry about that again, right? Let's fixate on that again. Let's try to make a whole soap opera in our mind. Oh, what I could have said to come back, right? Like you're just thinking of the whole process again. And when that happens, now you're aggravating yourself. Now you're becoming angry all over again for something that's already done and happened. And nothing can be changed, right? Or you start fixating on the future. You're anxious about, going back to work on Monday, or starting a new job, or trying to plan for something, right? Your mind is out there, right? We're trying to sit here, our body is here, but our mind is 1,000 miles away, right? And so we have to, as we sit and meditate, we're reprogramming our mind to say, hey, no, we're pulling back on the distractions of the past and anxieties of the future, and we're trying to still it here in the present. And it's not going to happen overnight. It may take months, even years, but you'll slowly start to see that your mind is slowly calming down, right? We're not here to force our minds to stop thinking, because you can force your mind to stop thinking. But what happens there is you create a rigid mind, right? You're not able to open up yourself to the experiences that are happening when you're meditating, right? Because you're fixated on stopping thinking. As experiences happen, you avoid it, or you don't see it, or you don't accept it, or take it in, right? Because when we're meditating, we're here to be open to the experiences as they happen, right? When you feel sensations in your body, you notate that, right? You observe that, you accept that. As thoughts arise, you observe it, you accept it, you meditate on it. Emotions arise, you do the same. You do the same thing. So you want to be open to the experiences as they happen. You don't want to be so rigid and closed off that you lose out on some things, right? Because again, we're here to work on our mind. So if you're constantly ignoring what your mind is trying to tell you that you need to work on, then you're missing out on what the meditation is for, right? That's where labeling happens, because the more you label things as they arise, whether it's food or anger, right? Or maybe a certain person constantly comes up in your mind. And so you're labeling those feelings, those sensations, those emotions. So at the end of the day, you can tally all those different labels and see exactly what arises the most, right? And so now maybe you feel angry towards toward a certain person, and so now you have something to work with. Oh, that person, every time I meditate, or every often when I meditate, this person always arises, and I'm always thinking of negativity or anger toward them, right? Now you have something to work with. Now you know that this person or this emotion always arises, right? And so now you can do something about it. And I always say sometimes you have to distance yourself from people, maybe you have to unfriend them, right? Or just completely cut them off, right? Because they're causing you so much suffering in life. Why are they still there, right? And it could be anything else, right? It could be your job, it could be family, it could be just unsatisfactory in different aspects of your life. But the point of labeling is to find out what those things are that are causing you to suffer so that you can do something about it. And once you do something about it, then those thoughts and emotions and feelings will stop arising when you meditate, and you'll have a calmer mind, right? A less distracted mind. And so the more you take things out that keep arising, the less you have to arise in the first place. And eventually you will have that calm, settled, no thought mind, right? But that's not the point of meditation. Don't think that you have to sit and not think. That's not the point. If you're not thinking, then you're not practicing, right? The point is not to not think, but to know that you're thinking, right? So if you're meditating and you're meditating on your object of meditation and distractions arise, then just notate the distraction, let it be, accept it, and move on. Sometimes it may take a few seconds for you to recognize that you're being distracted, maybe a few minutes, maybe the whole session. It's fine, it doesn't matter. As long as you are able to recognize that a distraction arose and you label it, then you're doing meditation correctly, right? Don't think because you're constantly distracted and you're thinking the whole time that you're doing meditation wrong. You're not. As long as you are able to be aware, as long as you're aware that you're being distracted, you're aware that you're being pulled on this mental movie that you're creating in your mind, then being mindful of that and being aware of that happening is all you need to do. Eventually your mind will start to settle and start to recognize and realize that when you sit for meditation, you're trying to observe the mind, you're trying to settle it and quiet it. So eventually those thoughts will start to stop bothering you so much. sometimes, maybe. It's up to you. It's all on you, buddies. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I've already overtalked. Any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yes, Cynthia.
So you mentioned that the low energy, high energy, two different hindrances, right? Is anxiety considered a high energy thing, or is that just because basically what I'm understanding is you're ruminating, you're thinking, and so it's kind of like a hyper mode, right? So
Right.
it's a lot of energy, but just towards the wrong object or towards the wrong things that we can't change or whatever it may be.
Right.
But is that part of that, or is that more just like a distraction, or does it fit somewhere else in the hindrances?
It fits in restlessness and worry, because that's what anxiety is, right? You're worrying about something. And so recognizing what you're worrying about, you can do one of two things. When a hindrance arises, you can either acknowledge it, recognize it, and let it be, or you can take that hindrance, whatever's arising for that hindrance, and making that the object of meditation. And when you do that, you start to work with that anxiety. Where is it coming from? Why is it coming? Why is it arising? Right? What's causing it? What is the root cause of this anxiety? Right? So you can either acknowledge it and leave it be, acknowledge and label it as arising, or take it and use it as your object of meditation. Right? This is the contemplation part of meditation. Right? You're here, you're trying to concentrate, you acknowledge it, you recognize it, you label it, and then you have the contemplation part of meditation. So you can do one of two things, right? Because ultimately, you kind of do want to do both, right? You do want to acknowledge and let things arise and label it and move on, to have that steady, stable meditation. But on the other hand, eventually you also do want to contemplate on the reasons as why they arise, right? Which is what we will do eventually when we start to accumulate all those labels, right? Because eventually you do want to figure out why they're always arising, right? You want to take one label and use that as your meditation object. So by doing that and looking into the reality of things, of that anxiety, then you start to untangle it. You start to dissect it. You start to see where it's coming from, why it's there, right?
So in the beginning, maybe when it's causing you harm, then you put it down because you need the peace of mind. You need to be able to get to that level. And then once you kind of achieve that, then you will come back and then really try to figure it out, because obviously it's something that
Right.
is reoccurring or a theme or perhaps a behavior.
Right.
Yeah, may I add? So my wife is a therapist at a psychiatric hospital in San Antonio, and we discussed this recently, which I felt would be really helpful as like a scientific add-on to the Buddhist meditation practice. There's a study or a practice called distress tolerance. Essentially, that's what we're doing in meditation. While the mind is not a muscle, it reacts like a muscle, and we're taking it to the gym. Right? So when you go into the gym, you can't just grab the 30-pound dumbbells and start throwing them up. Like, you got to work your way up to that. So though you may experience anxiety, stress, fear, frustration, you might open that closet up and see some things you don't like, or traumas or angers. Though you can't say like, oh, I'm meditating, I'm going to nip it in the bud right now. That's that false expectation of desire. But maybe I didn't react as hard this time. Maybe I was able to look in that closet and see the things, the anxieties and the fears and the bad, and work through it calmly. Maybe I didn't, when my dog started scratching at the door, I didn't yell at it. Or when my kid made a loud noise, I didn't jump up and yell at him or something. And so what you're doing is, you got to pat yourself on the back at that point and say, I did good, I had a good sit. And then the next time, hopefully you can continue to build on that. That's the psychiatric or the psychology side of it.
So wrong.
So
I'm
wrong.
just kidding.
I hope that was.
No, but that is correct, because you do have to work your way up in meditation. You can't just say, hey, I've never meditated before, but I want to sit down right now and become a Buddha in the next 10 minutes, which has happened.
It can look differently for different people as we progress.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not black and white. It's a complete rainbow of practice, right? And so you can, for gifted people, you can sit down and have perfect sessions every single time, or you sit down and have perfect sessions every other time, or you sit down and have sessions once a month, good sessions once a month, right? It all comes down to your own discipline in your practice and how you observe and work with your mind, and then what you do with the observations. Okay, I'm stop talking. Yes, ma'am.
Does it make a difference whether you try to practice towards the beginning of the day or the end of the day?
That is all on you. That's 100% up to you. Because that comes down to too much energy or too little energy, right? Sometimes, depending if you're a morning person or a night person, maybe meditating in the morning is better for you. Maybe meditating in the afternoon is better for you, or in the evening is better, right? There's really no perfect time to meditate. The perfect time to meditate is whenever you can meditate. Because every waking moment is an opportunity to meditate. Anything we do is meditation, right? We also have to get out of the habit of thinking that meditation is only when you're sitting on the cushion, right? Because meditation can be anything you're doing. What is meditation in the first place? Meditation is concentrating on one thing at a time, right? And so when we're meditating, our object of meditation is our breath, right? We're only concentrating on our breathing. But anything else we do is also meditation. When you're driving, you're doing one thing at a time. That's also meditation. When you're cleaning one thing at a time. That's meditation. When you're cooking one thing at a time. That's meditation. Doing dishes, doing laundry. Anything you're doing with focus and awareness is considered meditation, right? So when you're leaving and you're walking back to your car, and you can practice walking meditation, right? When you're driving, you're focusing on just driving. That's meditation, right? So anything you do, any waking moment activity that you do is meditation if you apply meditation practice to it, right? So you're not, if you're cooking and you're distracted or you're multitasking, that's not meditation because you're doing 10 million things at a time, right? You're not focusing on your cooking. If you're not focused on your cooking, then you have the potential of burning it or missing an ingredient or putting too much ingredients, right? You ruin the meal. Same thing when you're cleaning. If you're not cleaning correctly, or if you miss a step, or if you mop before sweeping, then you're just, swishing dirt around the floor. You're not doing it wholeheartedly and with focus. So, yeah, it's up to you. It's up to you. I think even if you're not a morning person, because I used to not be a morning person before I became a monk. Now that I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I have to be a morning person. So meditating in the morning is much easier. In the afternoon, depends if I nap or not, which I usually don't. But in the evening, it's also very difficult. So in the evening, I have the shortest session of meditation, only 30 minutes, because I'm already exhausted from the whole day. And in the afternoon, it's usually about 45 minutes, if I can, an hour. And the morning is the longest. It's 90 minutes of sitting, 15 walking, and another 30 of sitting. So it's a long session. But I'm also very awake. I'm the type of person that once I'm awake, I'm awake. Like I cannot go back to sleep, regardless of what time it is. So it's easier for me to tolerate that long session in the morning. But as the day progresses, and as I work and do chores and do things, my mind starts to exhaust itself, so it's more difficult as the day goes. So it's up to you. Experiment with different times and methods. that way you can find what works for you best. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, then we will sit for meditation, and then after that we will get up and do walking meditation as well, and then sit back down for any final moments, experiences, concerns, emotional outbursts. Any additional cushion? Please rise, we'll do our mindful meditation now. Please just push up and forward. And then just make a line at the edge of the carpet. Welcome back. How was everyone's meditation today? Lots of opportunities for labeling today since we have quite a few construction maintenance going on outside. So hopefully you've taken those opportunities to practice your labeling skills and not play what's going on out there stories. Yes, sir.
Do you have any tips on labeling?
Any tips on what?
On labeling? What kind of words do you use?
Use whatever first comes up. There's no right or wrong labels. But what's important is to use a word that signifies directly what the distraction is. So right now we're hearing sounds, right? So the label would just be sound, or hammer, or wood, or walking, right? You're labeling what is the thing itself is, right? You're not labeling noise outside or workers outside. You're just labeling noise or hammer, right? You're labeling the exact thing that you are labeling. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
The source?
The source of the distraction.
What if it's a thought?
Same thing. What kind of thought is it? Is it an angry thought? Anger, hunger, curiosity, denial, irritation, whatever it may be.
So I want to share what I was walking, right, and there's always like where do you place your hands, right? For me, that's always a thing. It's a little proportionate to, of course, your body, right? And so I feel really comfortable with my hands behind my back, right? As opposed to in front or on the side. And so I'm doing this walking meditation, and I'm getting too distracted with my hands. Just kind of really trying to figure it out. Because I'm just going to do, and the only reason that I didn't want to do it in my back is my vanity, because it makes my stomach stick out. And so I didn't want to do it because of that. And so again, I'm distracted, right? Because I'm not thinking about the meditation. So I finally I labeled it vanity. And I put my hands behind my back and got back to it.
You labeled it what?
Vanity. Because
What?
that was vanity.
Vanity.
I'm being vain. Because like you mentioned earlier, if I solve the source of it, then it will bring me back. And that's the whole purpose of just doing a simple label that describes it, right?
Right.
Is so that you can instead of creating a whole story or a scenario and a narrative, you just label it. You're like, yes, I know you exist, but let me get back to whatever you're doing. But I did root it down to vanity. It wasn't so much the distraction of my hands. I knew the solution, but I didn't want to do it because I didn't want my stomach to stick out. And that's just dumb. So anyway.
Yes, sir.
I know, like, for me, early on in meditation, when feelings arise and thoughts arise, you want to go with the first descriptive word that comes to mind because you don't want to waste time and, like, go down another thought rabbit hole. But those words, denial, anxiety, frustration, that allows for more introspection, which is another thing we can meditate on. Introspect. Why do I feel insecure? Why do I experience anxiety? And then rationalize that. Like, is that really, because a lot of the times we're not anxious about what's happening, we're anxious about what we're thinking might happen. And so why is that? And so those words can really provide a lot of key insight. At least that's what I have found.
Yes, ma'am.
So I've been, when I start to meditate, the first thing I find that helps me is to identify, I reach out and start with the closest noise, distraction, which would be the next one. If I'm sitting in my house and the refrigerator cuts on, I hear construction going, and I try to acknowledge each one and identify what it is so I can file it and move on to, So that's actually, I was glad they were working because it gave me the opportunity to practice that. Because we tend
Exactly. And eventually, usually, once you label something and you hear it again, it doesn't bother you as much, right? Because you've already identified what it is. You've labeled it and you can move on to something else. And eventually, as you do that, even though there's noise in the background, your mind will be stable enough where it's a smooth ride, right? And there's no bumpiness and worrying about what the noises are. Which is a good thing, because you want to be able to meditate with complete, I don't want to say the word war, because you know what's going on, but if there were a war going on outside of the temple, it wouldn't bother you, right, as you meditate, because you know how to work with that sound, or work with the distractions happening outside. If that makes sense. Yes, sir.
So what my friend said back there really helped me, because I went into this meditation asking myself, do I want this new career change? Because I have this opportunity to make this career change. So I just repeated it over and over. Do I want this job? Do I want this job? And the labeling was betrayal from a previous leader, right? And also confusion. So it helped me articulate that. And then she helped me realize my feet. I've always had an issue with that, right? So in vain, right? And the universe spoke to me now, because again, my friend didn't tell me about wearing socks, right? And so I'm forced to have people that I don't know stare at my feet, right? And I've always had this issue, and now I'm being forced to confront it here and now, right? And so it's serendipitous, right? That this is the conversation. It's just forcing me to just accept it.
To accept things as they are, exactly. And that's the beauty in life, is to accept things as they are, right? Because we have a bad habit with expectations. We expect the world to be a certain way. We expect people to be a certain way. We expect places to be a certain way. And so when they don't meet our expectations, we suffer. Oh, that person wasn't who I thought it was. This vacation isn't as fun as I thought it would be. This job isn't as amazing as I thought it would be. This car isn't as fancy as I thought it would be, right? All these expectations that we had for things, when they don't meet, when they aren't met, we suffer, right? And so the beauty of what meditation can bring is to allow you to accept things as they are without expectations, or without having strong expectations. Otherwise, what happens is, especially in the case of aversion or ill will, right? There's a lot of times where we have expectations of people, and maybe they do something that is hurtful, or that causes us to see them in a negative light, right? They make this impression on us, and forever, the rest of our lives, we're only going to see that person because of the faults they've made, right? There's a saying that the thought of your mother is not your mother, right? Because you have a thought of your mother, but that thought isn't really her, right? So the same thing of your thought of people is not that person. And so when we create these expectations of people and they are not met by us, by our mind, and they do something bad, for instance, then every time we see them, all we're going to know and remember is the bad thing or the mistake that they've made, regardless of how opposite they are to what we think they are. We're never going to see that because we have this expectation that was not met. So expectation can be very dangerous. And so when we're able to let go of expectations, especially meditation, if you sit down with the expectation of, I'm going to sit here and become a Buddha in the next 30 minutes, and it doesn't happen, then you're not going to be so hurt that you did not become a Buddha. So releasing expectations and accepting things as they are will really help you move on and allow things to just be. There's nothing you can do about it. Not having socks on, there's nothing you can do about it. Why worry about it? It's already happened. Who cares? Right. Yes, ma'am.
May I suggest we carry socks in the store?
That's an idea. Not. Just kidding. Alrighty. Any other questions, concerns, emotional outbursts that I don't want to hear? Just kidding. Alrighty. Well, that'll be for our class. I think starting next class, we'll start to spice up our meditation. Our next class will do the combination of chanting, meditation. Sorry, I was going to use a different word, but I was like, what was that word? So our speed chant, our speed meditation.
That's fun.
So we'll start doing that next class. And starting from next class, we'll start to really dig into our main topic for this semester, which is developing our axis concentration mind. And we'll go into that in detail starting from next class. Other than that, you are all welcome to join us. We have a temple tour going on at 12 p.m. today. So if you are unfamiliar with Buddhism or Buddhist culture and anything Buddhism, then you're welcome to join us for this tour. We will essentially just go over a little bit of history of Buddhism, history of the temple, the monastics, and really just kind of cover the iconography of Buddhist rituals and symbols and statues and all that fun stuff. So you're welcome to stay and join us for that at 12. Other than that, I will see everyone in our next class. Thank you. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.